Okay, so welcome to MMA Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Danny Batten, and I'm really pleased to say I've got a guest, Harry Hardwick. Harry, how are you?
I am great. Just chilling. Off to Centre Parks tomorrow, so get a little bit of a reset from all the training and that. But yeah, things are good.
Yeah, things are really good because you've had some really nice successes for a long stretch now. But you had that Cage Warriors fight against Orlando. How do you feel that went?
It was almost like too good. Like I know I've worked my ass off for years and put myself in position for these things, and I know I've earned it, but I still feel very lucky and very grateful to have had a fight like that in my hometown. For all the things that went on before the fight with the original opponent pulling out, um, I absolutely buggered my rib about 11 days out from the fight, and Orlando being almost like like if he was to have beaten me, that would have been disastrous. Like because he was a dangerous guy, but not like he didn't have the biggest record or the most impressive record. So it was like it would have been a fucking disaster to lose that. But everything went well. The fact we didn't have a lot of time to game plan for him, but a lot of stuff that we'd seen in his game that we were able to like. It wasn't as intricate a game plan. It was just like, oh, he does this, so we will counter with this, or he does this. This creates this opening, and then just keep it dumb and just go for it. Like he really reaches with his right hand to try and parry jab. I mean, yeah, his right hand to try and parry jab. So it was like, okay, fake, go left hook. He throws jammy like stomp kicks to the knee. Make sure you don't let your leg get hyperextended at any point. But yeah, it went well. I'm buzzing. I'm really happy. I feel like it's been a long time coming, and yeah.
Yeah, no, great work. Because some fighters they just get in there, no matter who they face, and they just literally just run it as it comes. Some people don't like to game plan, but is game planning something that you like to put in place every single time?
Generally, yeah. So because obviously I do a lot of coaching as well. So like when I'm in a coaching capacity, I'm very almost like overthinky with my game plan a lot. Whereas when it's me fighting, I let George, I let Abdul, I let Pete tell me things that I should do. I'll have a little bit of a look, but I think by the time you're in the fight, you don't want paralysis by analysis, so you can't be like overthinking it. Everything has to be simple and digestible. Like I can't,
Of course.
especially with it, we had like what 10 days, 11 days to prepare stuff for Orlando, so it was stuff we could just grab onto really quick, be like this, and then there was just was looking at stuff I already had that lines up with his weaknesses, exploit that, and then just exploit the fact that I'd been training for 5 rounds and he hadn't. So just get after him and get him tired.
Okay, so you said that it obviously went well, almost too well. It obviously went according to how you was hoping it was going to go. But have you had a situation in recent times where a fight has not gone the way you thought it was and you've had to adapt and change plan? Maybe when you've gone back to the corner and you've had to switch things up, maybe you had a striking scenario and had to take it to the ground because it weren't going the way you thought. Have you had to ever do game plan B, so to speak?
Yeah. So the Pasquale fight was a little bit of a weird one where I got dropped bad. But it wasn't as much of like an overly technical game plan shift, or there was a bit more wrestling involved in the game plan, a bit more clinching. But then after he dropped me and he kind of emptied the tank trying to finish me, there was those seconds where I could just see, all right, his energy's not recovered. Get after him. And while his energy not being recovered, stuff was landing. The Conmon Death fight, actually, no, he's just an awkward guy to deal with. obviously booted me in the rib and injured my rib. I think he injured Jordan in the first round of their fight as well. He's just really good at doing weird stuff and like hurting you and then being incredibly difficult to hit with stuff. So he was like, I had to go on the back foot and start like jabbing out of both stances. And yeah, I had to really change what I would typically do against him because he is. I think that is just his thing. His thing is he spoils what you're doing. He's really good at spoiling what you're doing and like scuffling your tools.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder whether that is the case with whoever he faces, whether all opposition have that same view, or whether it's just a case of, styles make for different difficulties. Because, the fight game is a little strange in that, I could have beaten 2 or 3 people in a row, and that third person that I beat could then beat or lose against someone that I beat or won against. Do you understand what I'm saying? So one fighter could beat one fighter, and then another fighter that beat that fighter can't beat the other fighter, and it can be a case of styles. I wonder how much of that is part of what you're saying. I wonder whether it's just his style that made it feel awkward for you, because I'd imagine that you're an awkward conquest for people. I wouldn't say your style is a typical style. So you've got an unusual tempo. You're almost Diaz style. You're kind of like just in their face at all times.
Yeah, well, like I actually kind of reverse engineered it a little bit. I thought, oh, what is difficult to deal with? I'm going to do that.
Right.
In certain respects, and then also it's kind of like the antithesis to some of the stuff George does. I think there's elements of where we have, battled with each other in the gym for as many years as we have. Like we've got, like George is super good at making reads, and I'm quite good at making myself hard to read. And there's kind of this battle that goes on at times. But yeah, I think that is an advantage in my favor. Like there was when the opponent got switched up and it was like, oh, I'm fighting Orlando. I took confidence from the fact that I'm going to be more difficult to prepare for in these 10 days than he's going to, like he's going to be having a harder time figuring out how to game plan for me and what to do than I am for him. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. And when you say about you and your brother, I take it that both being that you're both now Cage Warriors world champions, you both reached the highest order of that promotion. Do you have really competitive rounds? Do you actually spar full on, if you will? Obviously not fighting, but do you spar each other real? Can you do that being brothers? Because I trained with my brother all through my life, and man, we went at each other. I don't know whether that's the case with all brothers.
We do, but there is an element of control with it. And in fairness, because obviously you had the injury earlier this year, and then I injured myself before the fight, and like I've only just got back into the swing of things like a couple of weeks back. And then as I've got back into the swing of things, obviously George has been back doing rounds for a little while. He's ended up picking up a bit of an illness. So it's kind of like we haven't done rounds with each other in ages. This is the longest spell in our lives where we've not really had a competitive goal with each other. And then I'm obviously on holiday this week. So it's going to be interesting to see what the sparring is going to be like when we finally get around with each other again. I think there is going to be an element of, all right, it's been a while. We need to fucking, we need to see what's what.
And just so viewers know, what was his actual situation with his injury? It's like fractured jaw, right?
Broken jaw. So he got a break and a fracture.
How did that happen?
Just a high kick and sparring. It wasn't even the hardest kick because there was like cameras about. We looked at it afterwards and we were like, what the fuck? It was literally the first strike of the round. Wasn't a particularly hard strike. Didn't rock him. George just high-fived the guy afterwards, continued to spar, and then was defending a takedown and looked down at the mat and like there was just blood everywhere because his mouth was pissing with blood, and he was like, "Oh, this doesn't seem good." My cousin, because we were sparring in Liverpool, and our cousin, who's a videographer, we're going to get like a YouTube channel started. But obviously, that was meant to be the first episode, the sparring trip to Liverpool episode, and it got kind of disorganized. And we've managed to try finally pull a video together. But my cousin drove George to the hospital while I continued to spar. Because I just thought, he's probably just knacked his tooth or something. He seems all right. And then I get a text, jaw is broken. I'm like, oh, fuck. And then we ended up on a bit of a side quest where like George was staying in Aintree Hospital in Liverpool. My cousin, he was in the process of selling his flat in Manchester, so we had that accessible that week. That would be the last week we could have used it. So we were like going back and forth between Manchester and Aintree Hospital, Manchester and Liverpool every day, seeing George, checking on him, realizing that George is pretty good with his own company. So we got to a point where like we felt like we were annoying him, so he had to leave for a bit. Come back. And then he broke his jaw on the Tuesday morning and didn't end up getting surgery till the Friday night because they'd been like, I think in the facial it's apparently like a nationally renowned facial surgery unit. So we knew he was in good hands, but obviously the surgery would get put off like someone would get into a car accident, they'd be on the top of the list. Like there was a guy in there who had every single bone in his face broken, and we were like, fucking hell, like we can't really complain that it's taken a few days to put him under the knife, really.
Right.
So then he broke his jaw, had the surgery, and then he's probably the only person I know who could get in better shape while recovering from that. Like, he did have to have like a few days where he was completely resting, but even then, within a week, he was doing he was picking up relatively light weights because anything where he would strain and tense his jaw would be a problem. And he was just farmers walking around the gym for like extended stretches of time. He was then crawling a lot. And then once his jaw got better to the point where he could actually start straining and tensing a bit, he'd start just doing a lot more resistance training, assault bike stuff, hitting the bag, hitting the bag was a bit later, shadow boxing stuff. And then he was just doing the old cliche of watching fights while he was on a bit of cardio equipment, and just making observations and stuff. And where he was watching so much fights, my English is terrible. So many fights, and making these observations. There was stuff he was able to take from just watching fights that when he got back into rounds, when he got back into wrestling, he was able to implement straight away. So like he has definitely made the best of the situation and the cards that were dealt. He is back sparring. We could potentially have some fight news for him that I definitely can't announce now because there's been no pen to paper yet, but it's looking promising. So yeah, things are looking good in the world of George. But
okay, that's positive. Yeah, because I remember when I found out about it, I was like, oh my goodness, because similar sort of breaks have sort of ended careers, but normally with people a little bit perhaps older than George. But I was like, oh, you're kidding me! How the hell did this happen? But this is the thing, isn't it? For every minute that we're putting in sparring in the gym, you're susceptible to potential injury. Although you do try to train as safe as we can, it's a sport of percentages, and you're on the mat a lot. Your chances go up of picking up an injury, but that one was pretty serious. But it's nice to hear that he's recovering well and taking the best out of a bad situation and obsessing. Because something I do pick up from you and your brother is you're real obsessives with this sport. Your brains don't seem to ever switch off, which is, I would say I'm similar. I've got an absolute love and passion for this sport. And even though now I'm over 50 years of age and I know I'm never going to step back in the cage, I don't even spar MMA anymore. But my love for watching the evolutionary process of the sport is still there, and I still really enjoy watching my students training spar. But on that, you know, you're not just a fighter, you're a coach as well in your own right. Have you got some people that you feel you might want to mention that you know are going to be big names in the future? We've got people to look out for.
Yeah, well, obviously, Leon Arms and Joe Fields have burst into the pro ranks. They've been the first pros that, you know, like obviously Abdul's produced a few before us, but like since me and George have come up through the ranks of coaching, you know, like the first people we've ended up putting through to that. So those are people to keep an eye on. And honestly, we've got a bunch of like teenage killers from the gym. Obviously, we've got a few, you know, few good amateur fighters like Zanya Cameron's a you know, notable mention of someone who's really good and gives us hard rounds in the gym. But there's a bunch of teenagers we've got at the minute that I think are just really going to be good. Like Tyler Jones, little angry ginger kid. Luca Parker, absolute beast. Then we've got a load of lads who haven't even fought yet. They're under 16. Zach Patton, Ellis Jenny, David Ewart, Yad Hussein, Darren Sohail, Ibi, Arian. Oh, there's a bunch of people now who are like, I can see a lot of me and George in them, and like I can tell at their age now that like, oh, these people they're on the same path that we are. They're like it's factoring into every decision they make. We got to be there for these people, you know. Like we got to help these people along and give them better opportunities than we had, because we had fucking fuck all opportunities. You know, doing MMA coming from Middlesbrough when we were coming up, and Abdul had even less opportunities than us. So it's like, it's just making sure that the next generation of MFA fighters has better opportunities than us, as well as the technical know-how, and don't make all the same mistakes that we made technically or athletically, or you know, like even with stuff like diet and crap like that. Just making sure they're all better set up than us. You know,
Okay, so you know, that's sort of like people that where obviously things are going really, really well. But you know, as a coach as well, I have my frustrations in the past and present, and no doubt in the future, with talented fighters that just don't listen, or they don't want to do it the way you want to do it. Is this something you're experiencing as well?
Yeah, so it's an odd one, because like I'll never force anyone to fight. So if I start seeing that someone as talented as they are is a bit lazy, or like, you know, just doesn't want to show up as much, I'll chase them up a bit. But if their heart's not in it, then their heart's not in it. I ain't gonna, like, this sport's dangerous and it's difficult, and if you're not like fully committed to it, you're not fully committed to it. The thing where people don't listen and do things their own way is it's an interesting one, because like obviously there has to be some element in a fighter of self-development and self-expression. There needs to, like, I can't give someone every single move and thing and thought that they have, because they have different body attitude. So there has to be some level of, this is something they've kind of figured out and feels good to them, is what they do. But that is a very, very close cousin with the worst thing someone can have, where they just do stupid stuff. You know what? Like they're just like, they're stuck doing stupid, ineffective stuff, and like it's a really difficult one to figure out. Where like, when does the student being creative, and I mean, I guess how effective this stuff is, like when the student being creative, and you know, where they've got an eye and they've got that little bit of magic, where that stops, and where the student just being a bit of a divvy and doing stupid things starts. You know, like, because like, I guess just the measure of it is how effective it is. Because I know Anderson Silva, you know, the elbow he knocked Tony Fruckland out with.
Yeah.
He saw that in Ong Bak and was practicing it in his garage, you know, like a couple of times a day. a couple of hundred times a day, and his wife and his manager and his coaches were all like, "Don't do that, elbow, it's stupid." But he had it in his head like, "No, I'm gonna do this. Like, this is what I'm gonna do." And obviously, he got a spectacular knockout. But then, by the same token, I can't imagine any coach told Rory McDonald, "Oh, an Imanari roll's a great idea against Gegard Mousasi." And he, it was just one of those moments. He thought, "Oh yeah, this is a good idea," and it got his head panned in. So like, it's very hard to tell where like a student being creative and brilliant ends, and a student being a bit moronic and suicidal begins. It is such a headache.
Something else, Harry, that I noticed through, we're friends on Facebook, and obviously I see what posts you put up, and I always take an interest, being that we've been friends for some time now. And you're always really respectful of the roots where you come from in terms of your coaching. I think you've had two main coaches, haven't you? Mohammed and Peter Irving, I believe it is.
Yeah, so in mixed martial arts, I've had Abdul Muhammad and Peter Irving, and then before mixed martial arts, when it was Thai boxing, it was Kin Preong Thawang and Stephen Long.
Yeah. And are they still influencing you now? I do see that occasionally do pop down to your club, but are they still influencing you and having a hand in your students' progression?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like MFA is still Abdul's gym. It's just we don't. It's not like a big money making operation. Like Abdul never really cared about making money from the gym. He kind of just wanted somewhere to train and somewhere to teach out of. And then the focus has always been producing fighters. It's not really been making money. So Abdul's got like his own businesses and stuff outside of that. It's kind of like they are businesses that can keep him a bit busy on weekends. Like you're owning a pizza shop, working on the doors and stuff. But he is still very much in every day. And the thing with Abdul is he is still doing rounds with us multiple times a week, every week. Like,
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, like it's madness. He's recently decided, all right, I'm going to stop sparring MMA, because he goes through phases where he'll spar MMA consistently for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then realize, hang on, I'm old and I'm retired and I'm injured. Why am I doing it? And then he'll go through a spell of not doing it, and then just something will drag him back in. You'll always grapple, and that's like, so he'll do like around jiu-jitsu with us, and then afterwards be like, oh, this, like he'll have felt something or something. He's like, oh no, do this instead of this. Right. And then he loves wrestling. Like, we have to actually put the wrestling class. That's the one class in the week that is on earlier, because he works on the doors afterwards. And then he kept being late for work. He kept being late for work because he keep wrestling people. So we had to shift that one half an hour early. And then with Peter Irving, obviously we go to his gym in Newcastle once a week. Obviously he helps a lot with like game planning stuff. Like we send sparring videos and stuff. But so Tyler and Luke, who I mentioned earlier, like for the first time, because they've got availability during the day now. For the first time, we took them to get coaching with Pete, and it was great because I was just like, Pete, can we just go right back to basics? So we just did a session on the armbar, like literally just the armbar and the details of the armbar, and like how the leg should squeeze in, how you should control the posture, and how this and this and this. And like, it was good, one, to just see the young students see this and get that knowledge from Pete, instead of us getting the knowledge and then trying to pass it on to them. And then it was good for us just to go right back to basics like that with Pete, because sometimes obviously when you train with someone a lot, you kind of not all the time, but sometimes you'll forget to just go right back to that very bare bones basic kind of session where it's like, right, we're looking at this thing only, and we're going to do this thing. Like learning to walk again, just a bit better.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate of going over the basics, and I always say going over basics in a way that becomes high level basics. You know, I've been around the BJJ scene for a very long time, and Hodge Gracie is an absolute epitome of high level basics. He doesn't do any of the fancy stuff. He just does hardcore basics, just on a sensitivity, on a level that's borderline scientific. You know, he's just real micromanaging the small details. You know, I'm lucky enough to have, had a, having him down to train at our gym a couple of times, and it's always mind blowing the logic that's behind all of his moves. So I have a real appreciation for solid basics. So another thing that I want to talk about is, you may have seen on my Facebook, just recently been a fight show was put on by Trixel. Did you see this? That I post up criticisms. The thing that was concerning me on there is this, the fact that anyone can put on a fight show. It could be, it's highly unregulated. I don't know whether you took time out to see some of the fights on there, but there was not governed by a proper way, by weight clearly, and certainly not by level and experience. And there was actual world titles on the line on that fight show. Do you think that having a governing body to pass through to be allowed to do fight shows is something that needs to be put in place ASAP?
Yes. There is the weird trouble in this country, which is kind of how MMA has just always been allowed in this country. It's like, I'm not 100% certain on it. Like, I'm going to have to look into it. Like, Jack Slack's mentioned it a few times, but you can't make prize fighting of almost any description illegal here because of some strange ancient bylaw. So it's like, as much as it's not, because of that, there is no need for a governing body to make prize fighting legal. Whereas in America, there, like, prize fighting without a governing body is illegal. But yeah, I do think there needs to be something in place.
Yeah, because if you think, it's only been recent years, isn't it, that France legalized MMA bouts. They went through a long haul to get their government to allow it to open up to be able to have cage events in France. And could you imagine, because of these poorly run events with horrific matchups, God forbid something happens on a tragic level, that's going to set back our MMA scene. Can you imagine? It would just be awful. And like I said, I'm really passionate about this sport. I love this sport. I would hate for anything to put us back, because look, UK have now, we got several UFC champions, that have reached that highest level. And I just don't want nothing stepping us back. I think, UK is really stamping its authority that we're there to stay on the world scene now. Yeah, and it just concerns me a little bit. But along with that, there are fighters on there that have created a bloated record, or they're racking up wins against people with losing records. Have you had any dabblings and concerns in your experiences with fighters like this that perhaps want to match up against one of your inexperienced fighters and a lot more experience, or have you had experience of that yourself?
See, I've been quite, since day one where I've started like coaching and finding the lads from the gym fights, I've been quite aware that there is predatory matchmaking in combat sports generally. I think kind of because I was somewhat a victim of it at times earlier in my career, but there was a few of those times where I was on the wrong end of some predatory matchmaking and managed to win somehow.
Right.
Because I don't know, I wasn't particularly good back then, so there must have been something going on upstairs. But yeah, thankfully, Tapology kind of stepped in a few years ago and stopped. Like the Wes O'Neills and the Marcus Hammonds and people, and like the Reece Streets, they were just like, all right, a win over one of these people that is now a record ineligible, like doesn't count for your record kind of fight. I think Tapology did a good job of that, and that has massively helped the UK MMA scene. I know Emma, or like English Mixed Martial Arts Association, like Mark Goddard's thing, like they've done some good work, and I think just generally the UK MMA community on a whole calling people out for this bullshit is positive. I think it's very rare you see people get away with it now without some level of outrage, which I think we need to keep
I
up.
think
We need
outrage. We saw plenty of that, and I was putting my penny worth in as well. I just couldn't help myself. Okay. So just finally, what's the plan for the future? What are you hoping for? Where do you want to get? Is it only one promotion, or are you open to other promotions? What's the score? What's on Harry's mind for the future?
I'm looking at the UFC. Like that is the goal. Look, Middlesbrough's never had a UFC fighter before, and the first two need to be me and George. So got our eyes on the UFC. Obviously, if I don't, I'm staying ready for a short notice call up. I'm gonna just intersperse a few of like the horrible late stage fight camp sessions in over the next few weeks of training. Just for that little bit of mental confidence, make sure my weight's not out of control, and just be ready in case there's a short notice call up for Manchester, or even Abu Dhabi or whatever it is the week after, or Saudi Arabia or something. If not, that's fine. I'll defend my belt. I like fighting. I like training. I like preparing for fights. I'll defend my belt, and I'll defend my belt. But one day, hopefully within the next year, me and George will be in the UFC, flying the flag for Teesside.
Yeah, that'd be incredible. That'd be incredible, and I can't see why that can't happen. But as we experienced with Jordan Pasenik, who you've trained with many a times down at ours, I felt like he's been knocking at that UFC door for some time, but for some reason they're just not opening the door to him just yet. But we're still optimistic. But there are some other great promotions out there, and that's what I want to say. If another promotion does offer you something, is that something of interest that you would do to fill in the gaps between now and UFC?
Not at this point. At this point, I'm like happy defending my belt, going for the UFC. Maybe if I get a bit older, it doesn't seem like there's any UFC offer on the horizon. Then,
the reason I asked you is because we had the Paul Hughes situation as well. Someone else that I thought was going to be UFC bound and just didn't. But he's decided to go under another promotion. Seems to be doing really well. He's had 2 great wins. He had a little rocky moment, didn't he, in his last one? But he seems to be doing well for himself. Choosing another promotion right now until UFC does open the door to him.
A lot of fighters, because around from like bantamweight to lightweight, it seems so hard. Or maybe bantamweight to welterweight, it seems so hard to get into the UFC. Like it almost seems like you have to go Contender Series or short notice or the Ultimate Fighter. Like it almost seems like they're not signing guys. But I'm not opposed to it. I'm not going to be in like the never say never group. But right now, for me, it's look like it. I gotta aim for that, and I gotta me and George have got to put things to right from the Contender Series thing. We need to like put some wrongs to right there, and get Dana a Palmo.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what happens with that. But yeah, fingers crossed. I've got fingers crossed for you. I love following you and your brother's career, and I wish you the best for it. But we had UFC 303. There's some really good matchups on there. There was a few cancellations, which is a little disappointing, but they still managed to put up a good card. Let's start with the main one: Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prohaska. Prohaska's a real oddity with his striking method, isn't he? But it seems Pereira is he's just too clinical, too tidy. and makes that Prohaska look really vulnerable. He just really put a number on him. He didn't seem to make a step wrong, did he?
Yeah, it's like Pereira has he has like a few double attacks, you know, like where he's got like his jab to the body or his left hook, and like a few things that come off the same telegraph, and his telegraphs themselves are really limited. Like his low kick has barely any telegraph to it. He kind of just it goes out in a very just to like from his stance to the target. There's not a lot of wind up to it, and then it just seems like on impact it just carries on through someone. Same with his left hook; it just goes from his stance to the target with no wind up, but just whenever it lands, it just seems to keep going through the head. He's
it almost looks like it's delivered semi-contact, but it seems to have such a big impact when it all lands. And yeah, that low point style kick that he's got is really quite unusual. There's hardly any hip roll. The hip roll's like right at the point of contact. The leg comes straight up and just coils round right at the last moment. And it's really, really fascinating to keep watching back. And it must be so hard to be in front of him, trying to settle your footwork to try to get in with your own work when you've got someone that just times those low points as he does, and the left hook as he does, and the jab as he does. I imagine he makes you feel quite nervous being stood in front of him.
Yeah, and they all like play into each other, like obviously because he doesn't, his body's so non-committed on that low kick. If you try and counter the low kick, you end up falling into the left hook because you can just, as his legs coming back, you can just drag that left hook through. His jab to the body seems incredibly stiff, but he's not like overcommitting to it. So he's like jamming this stiff shot through the chest repeatedly, and he managed to catch Prohaska in the face a few times when Prohaska was trying to duck and level change a little bit, and the jab to the body was going to his base, like sometimes hitting the body, sometimes hitting the head. It was tracking really well. He is, I think physically he's a bit of an anomaly in some regards. I think he must have just like ridiculous, like he might have, but like good bone density. Just the right proportions to generate power and stuff. But I think also he doesn't resist his own power. Like he's relaxed when he needs to be, and he knows when to like put it in when he needs to. Like he's not tense and loading up on his shots. And in fact, one of the only times I've seen him in MMA tense and gritting his teeth and like almost like putting a lot of physical effort into his punches was the fight he lost before he got to the UFC. He was just, his shots weren't doing as much damage then. Like he was gritting his teeth, his shoulders were tense, and he was trying to kill the guy and flurrying with these combinations, and the shots weren't landing as well, and they didn't seem to have that same like. They didn't seem to carry through the target the same, and then he got tired and stuff. So,
if you was training Jiri for that fight, what would you like to see him do different to stand a better chance than what we saw? Because I personally felt like they just tried to do the same as the week they did before. They was just a little bit more aware of what was coming, but he seemed largely lost. I'm just wondering, if you was coaching him, what would you want to see different?
I would maybe go for, I think, leg attacks, like leg attack takedowns in the open. Pereira seems to do a good job on the fence of just sort of setting himself into a position that spoils the takedown and then chipping away, and he seems pretty comfortable there.
I absolutely agree with that, because if you've seen, he seems a little vulnerable when someone picks up a single leg. He can get off balance. But I'm really surprised everyone does go for an upper body clinch on him. I think there is a weakness in his defensive know-how from the waist down. I'm surprised people ain't targeting those legs more in wrestling.
Like obviously, we're not being in there with him. There might just be something about his stance and about the way he carries his hands and about like the threat with his legs. There might just be something off that makes doing that really off-putting. Because I never like to underestimate the intelligence of the coaches and these high level fighters at this level who are against him. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to like look like why would people not do that? Like what he must be doing something. Maybe it's the low hands. Maybe there is some element of like the hands being low that makes people think, oh, I'm just going to shoot into his arms, or maybe it's maybe he's got like a good management of distance where he's constantly like displacing people's footwork, because he does kind of
Yeah.
shuffle in a way that gets people like people are constantly adjusting their feet to him. They're constantly like skipping to his beat. Dancing to his beat. So like they never feel set and ready enough to get the drive for a leg attack, because there must just be. I feel like as far as fighters go, he would be a very difficult one to sort of stand across from. Do you know, like I
Yeah.
feel like there'd be a lot going on.
Yeah, I've got to
Just
say, their stare down, it was brilliant. They just did not take eyes off each other, but
it was
all
nearly
done
5 minutes, wasn't it?
respectfully. It wasn't done distastefully. They were both just highly, highly focused, and it did get me rather excited. But yeah, just unfortunately for Jury, it just wasn't meant to be. I do wonder whether he needs to experience another training camp. Not to say his team haven't done a great job; they really have, but I do wonder whether they can continue to steer his career in a way to adapt and change what he's already doing, because I feel like he's largely at the very highest level. He's kind of been found out. If he can't create the chaos with his striking and use that warrior spirit that he imposes on people to push to get the win, I think tactically he can be a little bit lost. But before time runs out, Ian Gary, from Ireland, and UK's very own MVP. Both very good strikers. MVP clearly a very unusual striker. Ian Gary more traditional in his approach, but been very, very successful with his striking. How did you feel that match was? Because that was a little bit of a hard one to judge, actually. I was a little bit, stuck on the fence on which way around that result was going to go.
Like I would agree with that. I'm not unhappy with the decision by any means. Like I, like I think it was close. There was a bit of, could you be looking at this? Could you be looking at this? But you can't really complain that Gary won. It is. I think there was some stat going around that this is the first time ever someone's won a decision without landing a significant strike. But I think that kind of tells the story of the fight. Like he did not want to offer MVP anything to counter, so he just didn't really do a whole lot on the feet. But his grappling was good. Like I thought he was chaining. Like obviously the wrestling had like bit of problems here and there, but when he got to the floor, his jiu-jitsu seemed good. He seemed like he was
Yeah,
making the right decisions, forcing the correct reactions. He got
yeah,
that finish in
I
the first
agree.
round.
He looked tight. I was really amazed that MVP survived that back take with the choking. I mean, he
Yeah,
wasn't defending how you traditionally should be defending it. It looked like it was clean in, but he was very, very calm there. Obviously, been in this situation before in training, and just knew better than us. He had his head and neck slightly out position, and Gary just couldn't complete it. But there was a few moments I thought that was going to be over really early, but
yeah.
he survived. I do
Well, one
wonder.
thing that I have noticed with MVP is if you watch a lot of his fights and grappling exchanges, he seems to have like might not necessarily be grip strength, but he has really good grips. And like when he gets control of people's wrists, he tends to be able to keep it
Yeah,
like very good, like isometric control of people's wrists. Like I remember it was one of the Lima fights where Lima couldn't get any ground and pound off because MVP was laying his back in guard, controlling
yeah, yeah,
Lima's wrist. And he managed to do it for an unusually long period of time. And maybe that kind of grip and grip strength just saved
yeah.
him
I
in
think
those
he's
situations.
got. He's
He
quite
just
a
had
big
that
guy.
grip.
Yeah, when I met him, he's very, very tall, and he has very, very long hands. And I think that's what it is. He has this really, really strong grip that's
Yeah,
hard to deal with.
I think the
And
adjustment that was
the thing I was going to
missing
say
for
was that I do wonder, MVP style is so reactive and instinctual and explosive. I do wonder whether, though, Father Time is slowly knocking at his door, because if you have a look, even just say 3 or 4 years ago, he was looking like a pure predator, like he was trying to shut people down and force a fight on them. Now he's looking like he's trying to reserve his energy levels a little bit. Do you feel that perhaps we're seeing the first signs of Father Time knocking at his door?
Yeah, I think there might be an element of Father Time. He is getting on a bit. There might be an element of just wear and tear. There might be another element of like there's that much more footage on him now that people are able to game plan a bit better, and he's never able to like, or it's not as easy for him to find that comfort in the fight the
Yeah,
way he used to.
yeah, yeah,
But I'm still impressed with what he was doing. I think one adjustment that would have helped him is this is probably fresh in my mind because Aliskerov fought last week, but when Hamzat fought Aliskerov kept ducking behind his lead shoulder to avoid the right hand. And then Gary was doing a similar thing of ducking behind his lead shoulder to avoid MVP's right hand, get under it to get under the body lock. But I think maybe just kind of selling that right hand was coming, and then maybe just pinging the uppercut or a knee down the middle. Maybe an uppercut would have been less risky than a knee with how
but sure. And just to wrap up some of the other ones, we can just briefly go. Do you like watching the female bouts?
I have not watched Robertson versus Watson. I did see the elbow on the main card one where her name came out like, I don't know, like she left the, like she just came out trying to forcing the fight, really. Seemed to get very tired. The more tidy technical fight.
Brianna Silva, she just looks so explosive and strong. And Macy's much more long and less powerfully set. But it did seem as they went into that second round, Macy obviously felt that there was something to be had from that clinch situation, because she really rushed into trying to get that tie clinch on Myra and put into some of those knees. But I thought it was a really good call for her to test the grappling out, even though Brianna Silva was known for having really good submissions off her back. Macy's really long and tall, so she can have her head position really deep in that closed guard and rise and posture up. And then, of course, she threw down that elbow. And I thought it was a good stoppage. I mean, crikey, it's like Mariana trenched the size of that cut. Do you feel that should have been the end of the match, or would you like to have seen it go on a little longer?
See, I'm always quite forgiving with cut stoppages. So I had that. I probably had an equally as bad cut in the first round against Nathan Rose, and then I managed to win that fight. So I'm always like, give him a chance. But I felt like the momentum of that fight was definitely swinging in Chelsea favor.
It was an interesting one, being that they were both opposites, short, stocky, and powerful, and then you had Macy that was tall, long, and she almost looked like it was semi-contact the way she was delivering her strikes. But it's, she can't help her body composition, but she done really, really well. Be interesting to see how she progresses. One fight that really frustrated me here, and he always seems to frustrate me, was Anthony Smith versus that Roman Dolidze. Both of them, I think they both ended up having this fight on short notice, if I've got this right.
So I think Smith took on a few weeks' notice, but then Dolidze took it on like very short, like typically.
But he looks physically, he's obviously a gifted man. I mean, he's got an incredible physique on him, which allowed him to fight up a weight that he now says he's going to stay. I'm not too sure that that's such a good idea for him to be going up over 2 weights. Anthony Smith, he's a courageous fighter. He's tough as they come, but I do find some of his decisions defensively questionable. Like when he got taken down and he was face down against the cage, I was really frustrated why he just was not getting up. I mean, I don't know whether it's a cardio issue on lack of know-how, but I found it really frustrating. He seems to just accept bad positions for too long.
It's the patented Anthony Smith fetal position. He just I don't think Lionheart's a particularly appropriate name for him, because he just, when shit gets hard, he just kind of goes into a fetal position and accepts it. He doesn't do anything to actually change what's
Yeah,
happening. It's like he kind of just fetal positions and hopes for the best. And then
yeah,
he's a odd and frustrating fighter, but he's getting on a little bit now and has had quite a lot of fights and quite a lot of
yeah,
wear and quite a lot of damage. So there is
yeah,
that.
yeah. But yeah, but well done to Roman. You know, he got the win, and like I said, he seems to be confident to fight over two weights. I can't help but think that he's still going to be more successful at the middleweight rather than that light heavyweight. But time will tell, I guess, if he does stick to his word and fight at light heavyweight as well. We had Dan Ige versus Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez is someone I hear a lot about, and I've seen his fights. Does look dangerous. I do feel like from his waist down, there's some suspicion that his footwork ain't quite in place. And so you saw him trying to do leg kicks. He was kicking really short, was out of range every time. And I do feel like with his upper body striking, he's just extremely explosive and athletic. But I do feel like there's some technical issues there. And I feel like Dan really exposed him a little bit here. Another one that was taken on short notice. I do wonder whether an in-shape, fully prepared Dan Ige would have actually beat Diego Lopez. I don't know whether you feel the same, but before Lopez went into this fight, I think I had bigger aspirations for him than I did after the fight. I started to realise there's perhaps some holes in his game that need closing off before he starts climbing that ladder and making an impression on the real big boys.
Yeah, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he did have to make. He ended up making featherweight on Thursday night.
Yeah,
Got woke up at 4 a.m. to be told he has to rehydrate to lightweight Friday morning.
that's right. He
Then,
weighed in 3 times, wasn't it? Was it
well,
3?
yeah. So he weighed in lightweight Friday morning, and then had to weigh in again at just 160, whatever it was
Yeah,
on the fight day. So he's probably had a bit of an up and down, and he did seem to be fighting a bit. He is an explosive guy, but he seemed to be fighting a bit erratically and a bit like
yeah,
he
definitely.
seemed a little bit off. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. If we see it multiple times, then it's like, all right, that these are problems in his game. But with it being such a weird situation, I'm impressed with both guys for being able to they both put on a really good fight in really
Definitely.
stupid circumstances, but that is the sport.
Yeah, yeah. No, I thought they'd done well. It was a good fight. It had me on the edge of my seat at all times. Yeah, it'd be interesting just to see how they both choose to take their careers. Dan seems to be accepting to take those late calls. So I don't know how serious he is about his career, trying to be reaching the #1 spot. I think he's in a happy place fighting. He seems to want to put on a good performance for fans rather than trying to move up that ladder.
I think his performances say that, but then he is an American, and there's the messages he sent to Hunter Campbell taking the fight, like "let me be great" and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know if he do. I think maybe he might have just reached his ceiling a little bit, but I don't know. He's a fighter I admire a lot. He's almost like what Steve Aimable was in Cage Warriors. He is that to the UFC almost. Do you know, Aimable never really, maybe until after I'd fought, and never really accepted. He was always like, "No, I'm going to get to the title," but never quite got there, and was never getting finished. Was giving everyone these really tough fights. I think Ige is going to be like that, and I think one day it's just going to crack. Where it's just that one fight too many, and I think he's going to have a performance or a fight where he gets really badly beaten up. I think his toughness he'll be too tough for his own good when that happens.
Sure, yeah, without a doubt.
The dog didn't like that prediction. Sorry, he's just outside the room, kind of waiting for me.
It is becoming a sport of the younger men now. I can't help but see that, particularly with sort of like below middleweight, sort of like welterweights and below, it seems to hit, as soon as you're hitting around that 35 years of age, it seems that you're just tipping past your peak, and it can be exposed with these youngsters. I just feel like the level's got such that you cannot be an old man in this sport. But look, we're going to have to start thinking about wrapping it up. Is there anyone that you want to mention or anything you want to mention before we wrap it up?
I would just like to mention my girlfriend because she's driving. I'm going on holiday tomorrow. And the dog and all that. But yeah, I'm just my coaches, my brothers, my training partners,
Okay.
my sponsors. Like I've got a lot of people I've got to thank, but I don't have many brain cells at the minute to remember. The last two brain cells are kind of. I'm just running out of brain cells, basically.
Look, we did have a really sticky start, didn't we? We were struggling to sort out this to get online, so we did play you around a little bit as well. We was an hour behind our scheduled time, but next time around, which I'm sure, and I hope there'll be a next time around when you come on, I'm sure it'll run a whole lot more smoother. But Harry, thanks for your time. It's always great chatting to you, both on the podcast and out. I'll carry on following your progress along with your brother, and I wish you both the best. But also, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in, the guys and girls that took time out to watch us. We are sponsored by two sponsors, The Pixel and also Pressure Performance. And also, please check out our coaching page, which is www.mma-unlocked.com. If you go on there, we've got a coaching page that me and my other coaches have developed, and I'd love people to take a little look on there. There's courses for sale on there, and there is a subscription base if that interests anyone. But again, thank you, Harry. Good night, everybody, and next time around.
Thank you very much.